Welcome to Supply Circles, stories from the innovators, disruptors and improvers in supply chain management today. Brought to you by AI Group.
Welcome back, or welcome to Supply Circles. If this is your first time, I'm James Scotland, coming to you today from Surface Paradise in the Yungambal language region. It's a beautiful day. It's stunning, just one of those great Australian days. And I'm excited because we've got a good episode coming up. Supply Circles is the business improvement podcast that asks the question, how can we in Australia create supply chains that are resilient and sustainable at a time when we're implementing the 3Ds, digitalisation, decarbonisation, and diversification of our risk profile, especially in our extended supply chains. Each fortnight, I delve into different sections of the end-to-end supply chain. I chat with fascinating and interesting people, and we try to have a little bit of fun along the way. Now, here's the thing. Up until the 1970s or so, businesses did everything they could in-house. As much as possible, businesses handled all aspects of production and distribution within their own means. Businesses had engineers, mechanics, fitters and turners, design people, time and motion experts, procurement staff, big warehouses holding everything conceivable, fleet managers, travel arrangers, sales planners, and so much more. They even had employees staffing the canteens, and they had a much-loved tea lady bringing teas and biscuits to office staff, kind of their own version of today's flight attendants, perhaps. And all of this was managed and coordinated and planned by general managers. Over time, everything not regarded as the core functions of the business have been outsourced. And the general managers of today are now called supply chain managers or business improvement managers or COO, looking to gain maximum effectiveness from the complex and dynamic labyrinth of relationships that we call business today. This podcast addresses the question, how can we make all of this work in a way that makes our business sustainable and resilient despite the constant disruptions and changes and the complexities? Well, today I want to explore again the role of digitalisation in our business and on the sustainable supply chains of the future. I keep saying the pace of technological change in the future will never be as slow as that change is today, which is a little scary, especially for business people, when you think of the many technological advances of recent times. The current big one being, of course, generative AI. My guest today is a specialist and a passionate communicator on these issues, and I'm looking forward to hearing his thoughts and getting his insights. My guest is David Phung. Hello, David. Welcome to the show.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming. I think it's going to be an exciting conversation.
We've got there eventually. It's fantastic. I've heard the story, and there is no one better than you to tell the David Phung story. So what's your life's journey? How did you end up here?
Life's journey. It's a good question. I did a lot of my growing up in financial services. Did the rounds at the various, banks, superannuation, wealth management, and I came to the realization that was probably a chapter I best close. And I pursued more of a consulting and technology-focused, more deeply technology-focused career path in, consulting and advisory work. And through that, I was able to, and very fortunately, was able to work with all different types of companies in different industries and sectors all over the world. So that was a real life lesson, and I found, a passion in applying design thinking techniques or human-centered design into disruptive technology or emerging technology. So it's a pairing it's a match made in heaven in some respects, because you're using iterative and experimental techniques to deploy technology that is embryonic in some cases and try to capture value from a new and emerging technology for existing businesses, customers, products and services. So it's that's been my path. Right now I'm the chief disruptor. That means a bunch of things. It means that we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we work very hard.
Yep.
But disruptive technology is a passion of mine. I work with clients. I work with clients to basically navigate the opportunities and challenges of generative AI. We guide guide the conversation from idea to implementation and ongoing, and help organizations navigate the many options out there and navigate the many ideas and use cases out there.
It's always good when you talk to someone who says that their life work is a match made in heaven. That's good. It's good to get people that are passionate about what they do and believe that they're doing good.
Yeah, I think generative AI is a funny space. Right? There's a lot of noise, I think, in the media. There's a lot of noise, and you've got to really look hard for the signal. So 2023 was really the year of hype. There was a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, and a lot of capital and talent being directed into generative AI. And it was a fascinating year because it was ChatGPT was the AI echo that was heard all around the world. And then since the release of ChatGPT by OpenAI, companies the world over have been scrambling to figure out what their strategy is with the technology. And I've seen the conversation evolve a lot over the past 12 months, and I would say that 2024 is going to be the year that shifts the generative AI conversation from cautious to serious. And what I mean by that is, companies are now starting to really mobilize around it. The conversations I have with people in culture, HR type folks is really around, hey, what do we as an organization need to be preparing for from a talent perspective to be generative AI ready? What sort of skills do we need to start embedding into our current workforce? What sort of skills are perhaps needing to be revisited as a result of new technologies such as generative AI? And what do we need to do today to be ready for this technology? Do we need to get our data ready? Do we need to have generative AI 101 training for all and sundry? So it's a really interesting time, and I think if I was to rewind back to early 2023, it was really about regulating it out of existence, right? That was pretty much the dialogue around. There's some whispers in Italy. I'm not sure of the latest, but in certain parts of Europe, just to regulate it and stamp it out of existence, it was deemed to be too dangerous. That slowly shifted to how do we embrace this, and now it's how do we really leverage it for value creation for enterprises, and how do we leverage it to improve the way that our people do their work, right? So it's been a fast shift from regulate out of existence to how do we leverage it for maximum value? So it's been fascinating in that regard, and I think now companies are taking it a lot more seriously. A lot more proof of concept type projects are emerging, and businesses now are starting to capture value from this category of emerging technology.
Yeah, great intro. Thank you, and a good explanation. Lay down some markers that we'll pick up and explore in more detail, because it's relevant to AI and this change. Tell me your version of what human-centered design around disrupting technology means. I love these words. I actually I'm passionate about human-centered design, as regular listeners know. But tell me your version of that. Explain that in terms of disruptive technology, perhaps.
Yeah, great question. Look, I think from the point of view of let's split that into two conversations, right? I mean, human-centered design as a principle is about user-led innovation, right? And it's about empathizing with the end user, whether it be internal end users or customers, about what they need to get out of technology. And it's the opposite of a traditional technology transformation where you embed technology and you have processes and people's tasks and customer interactions essentially form around that and wrap around that. Human-centered design is about understanding, those human tasks at a really, really micro level to figure out how the technology best serves the desired customer experience. And I mean, we could go into a lot more detail.
The best way we saw that, of course, was for all those that used old Nokias and Blackberries and whatever, we learned to use the phone. And then the iPhone came out and it was intuitive. You didn't have to learn it. You just it was just designed around the way I live.
For me, the most exciting part of generative AI is that for the first time in the history of computing of 60, 70 years, give or take, that input and interacting with technology will be done via natural language, right? Previously, to use your example, whether it be Nokias or iPhones, there was still a learning curve, right? There was a fairly steep learning curve, right? If you were to give an iPhone to, someone that was perhaps never had any exposure to technology, you'd have to learn it, right? You'd still have to learn the sort of gestures and the way that things were, the way that apps worked and the way that, I guess, the interface needed to be operated. Whereas with natural language, it is just natural language, right? And they say that in operating an AI solution using nothing more than natural language, whether it be text or voice input.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Because people, I mean, it was pretty easy to understand an iPhone, but if people said, do you have a Samsung? And you say, no, I'd have to learn how to use a Samsung. There's no one better than the other. They're just different. Whereas what you're suggesting is that AI there's no learning. You just start talking.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, the barrier to entry is virtually removed, right, from a accessibility point of view.
Let's while we're putting down markers, let's put down another marker. What is generative AI and how is it different from AI in the past?
Yeah, it's a bit of a confusing term, actually. I personally quite dislike the acronym AI because it's neither artificial nor is it intelligent, right? And AI, I think, is too broad a brush. It's too broad a brush. I mean, if we rewind back to, 30, 40 years, autopilot in commercial aeroplanes can be considered AI, right? So it's a pretty broad label. And then if you sort of fast forward to today and when we use terms like generative AI, it's simply I would say it's nothing more than marketing, right? What it really is in an engineering sense is an expert system, right? It knows how to do something very, very well. In the case of generative AI, it's about three things. One, having lots of data. Two, having lots of compute power to access, search, retrieve that data. And three, to have the ability to recognize, an incredible ability to recognize patterns and, of course, generate new content based on data that it has access to. So generative AI is really, what's it good at? It's good at ingesting and summarizing lots and lots of text-based data, right? There's, of course, multimodal type AI that's on the horizon, and there's actually quite a number of multimodal image and video-based tools that you've seen out there. And for the enterprise, the vast majority of use cases will be text-based, where it be, for customer service or product discovery or information retrieval, report generation, that sort of thing. And it's text-based, right? And it's probably the first time in human history that, quote unquote, white collar jobs are being automated, right? So there's a lot of, I guess, intrigue about what that all means to knowledge workers or white collar workers. There's a lot of, trepidation about how to approach it and how to deploy generative AI technology in a way that's going to be beneficial for the organization, beneficial for the end user and customers, products and services. There's a lot of different pilots that are being put into the ether, and there's no one right answer. And the really fascinating thing about generative AI is that it's a tool that looks like it can do anything. So what do you do with a tool that looks like it can do anything, right? And where do you start? So that's been a really interesting part of the conversations that I have on a daily, weekly basis with different industry leaders.
Why has it been accepted so quickly into the lexicon when it is so confusing? When it seems like it's promising everything, but no one knows what it does. But everyone's racing towards it, it would appear. It seems to have been adopted faster than all the previous technologies, despite the scary word of artificial.
Yeah, it's It's an interesting one, right? I've seen adoption really accelerate over the past, I would say, 3 months, and it's because it's such a seductive technology, right? You type some stuff in, and it generates content, and it sort of interacts with you, right?
Yeah.
And in a human mimicked way, and the compelling factors I think are three, right? One is that the ease of use, right? Two, the use cases and benefit and productivity benefit, to be specific, for knowledge workers is very apparent. You can very quickly see how it could, benefit your day-to-day work, whether it be generating ideas or refining your email or, rewriting something in a more positive tone or whatever it might be. And thirdly, there's just so much media hype about its potential, right? You've Google generative AI, you'll get no end of different reports about the trillions of dollars it'll add to economies here, there, and everywhere, and the way that it's going to accelerate knowledge work in every industry and sector. So I think it's a bit of a perfect storm of a lot of positive media sentiment, the accessibility of the free tools, and the ease of identifying how it would be related to your work and how it could add value to your day-to-day work. I think those confluence of factors have made it very easy for organizations to say, yes, let's give this initiative or give this generative AI project a go. So I think they're the primary reasons why adoption's been a lot faster. It's easy to understand, right? You go to a chat interface, you type some stuff in, you get it back, and ta-da.
That seems to be the key point. I spoke to Matt Dunn on this program a little while ago about AI, and he said a lot of businesses in the past have sort of been in that circular thinking of, I don't have time to digitalize because I've got normal business as usual. And then they look at it as confusing, so they don't digitalize, but that's meaning they don't have the time. There's this whole sort of issue of self-fulfilling inefficiencies.
Yeah.
But AI, particularly Gen AI, is this whole new idea about it's quite simple. We can get it up and running pretty quickly. Yeah, and you're agreeing with that, it sounds like?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those how long's a piece of string questions, right? It can be as complex or simple as your sort of business scenario or task, right? And then generative AI change happens really at the micro level, right? Assuming you have some top-down business sponsorship, executive sponsorship, that this is an initiative that you wish to pursue. And from there, the change and I guess the way in which it manifests really is at a task level, right? Generative AI is not good at jobs. It's good at tasks that are discrete, that have a start, middle, and end, and that can be easily measured and quantified, right? You have defined inputs, process, and outputs. That's what it's good at. It's good at summarizing lots of text-based information, right? There are known constraints, right? There are no known constraints with generative AI. It's not everything for everyone all the time. But there are many scenarios where, especially in in developed economies, in knowledge work, in high cognitive and labor-intensive tasks, it's very, very good at that because of its ability to rapidly summarize.
Yeah, so the first thing to do is recognize what AI is good for and how it can help your business, and don't get sort of confused by everything. It's going to do everything. It's going to replace humans. It's going to do all this sort of stuff. No, it's good at specific tasks. David Martin in our last episode said that one of the things he has seen is I say, send Dave Phung an email on these 3 points. And so generative AI sends you 48 pages on those 3 points, and you say to your AI, bring it down to 3 points. And there's this massive waste in the middle. And it seems to be one of the issues that's confusing and concerning the drivers of the technology.
Yeah, there's a really... I think a lot of the business concepts and approaches to adopting AI are really just starting to form, right? It's been very technology-led thus far.
Yeah. That's a really key point, though, isn't it? It's really early days. So
extremely.
Take a deep breath in.
Exactly. if it was in sort of human terms, it'd be we're at the stone and tablet, right? It's so early, and the earliness is symbolized by the rate of change, right? And the rate of change is very, very high at the moment. There's a recent article that I read in the Harvard Business Review about an emerging approach to adopting generative AI, which is around designing for dialogue, right? Because of traditional technology projects adopting technology for automation, and we're using that same lens to look at generative AI, and that lens is really around the taking away, the removal of tasks from human effort, whereas generative AI isn't really, that's not what it's supposed to do. That's not what it's good at. What it's really good at is being your digital co-worker, your sidekick, or your thinking assistant, right? I've heard different expressions around the same theme, but it's being measured, and success of generative AI projects are being measured by traditional technology initiatives, which is wrong, because it's not about taking tasks away. It's about really enhancing and accelerating what our workers do today, where it be improving the speed or the efficiency or the quality of the material that's produced. So it's really early days, and I don't think there is a quote unquote perfect approach yet. But there are there's some really strong, thought leaders around how to best think about and approach technology such as generative AI.
It's part of human nature that we measure things that are completely disruptive and completely different based on what we already know. We come up with weird metrics. One of my favorite, of course, is horsepower in engines. Right? Right. Horsepower, the number of horses that would be equivalent to this engine. And it gets to this stage where it's like 800 horses or 900 horses. And you just say, you're getting ridiculous now. This is a stupid metric. And we're falling into that same trap again when we're trying to figure out metrics based on old thinking when it's a completely different world.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the difficulty is that, someone very clever once recently told me that data and AI models in an organization need to be thought of as the living language of the organization, right? It's the living language. And I thought, wow, that's a really good way to think about it, because it's not a technology or an application that you log into and you sort of store documents in and so forth. It evolves, and it should, with your organization. It changes with, the various business cycles, and with your sort of within your competitive landscape, you need to update it with new information and train it accordingly. And it needs to be thought of like a living human capital, perhaps is a better way to put it. But a living language of your organization. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at generative AI as a concept.
Yeah, let's pick up some of that and talk about how we can use it in our organisations shortly.
Yep.
Let's firstly, though, because we are supply chain managers, and that means we're bogged down in making sure we're doing a complete risk assessment. Let me ask you just 3 quick questions about the risks to AI. The first one, of course, is the idea that people wanted to ban it because there's no guardrails.
Yep.
So there's no way.
Yep.
I could get a phone call saying, this is the Prime Minister of Australia and I'd like to, kill babies or something or other. And it would sound exactly like. Actually, I think I've told on this podcast before, Carlos, our digital producer, recently showed me a thing on his computer which said, this is the real James Scotland, and here's me reading Lord of the Rings, I think it was. And it sounded great. My voice sounded brilliant. Just wasn't me, but you'd never know. That's the concern about AI, isn't it? That we can be tricked. Now, how do we stop that? A little question.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot more discussion to be had in a regulatory sense about how we put those guardrails on, right? I think in any category of emerging technology, and especially in emerging technology, bad actors, they'll gravitate to, because bad actors in the system know that emerging technology doesn't have regulatory protection, right? So there's no easy answer, unfortunately, and I think that there's a lot of education and regulation needs to take place in parallel, right? Us as end users need to be informed, need to be, really trusting but verifying what we see, what we consume via public sources, right? I mean, in a general sense, anyone that provides you with information, especially online, especially free, has some kind of agenda that you may or may not ever know about, right? So, someone put it to me recently that, if you see, just this is in the context of deep fakes, I think is what you're referring to, right? If you see an A-list celebrity promoting a D-list product, right, you'll put the red flag up pretty quickly, right? Put the red flag up pretty quickly. And I think there's a bit of, buyer beware in some sense, but also from a regulatory perspective, there's a whole can of worms that need to be tackled there, right? That's around IP ownership, IP rights, what are the rights holders' position in all of this, and how do we safely embrace a technology that has so much potential at the same time as protecting those that are most vulnerable, right? And I think it's conversations like this, it's events like the Oz Industry Group put on that are the slow but important incremental steps that educate the masses, right? And there is no right answer, and I don't think there's a silver bullet solution. I know that there are technology focused solutions that help identify where something is AI generated and where it's not. But to go back to that previous point about bad actors, they'll find a way, right? In the same way that credit cards have been around for 20, 30, 40 years now, there are still credit card scams, right? Cryptocurrencies have been around for long enough. There are still cryptocurrency scams. There are people that are just predatory, and regulation and the sort of legal constructs that we have in place will act as a deterrent, and it'll get better over time. But it's really a much bigger conversation, that needs a lot more focus, especially in an age of a deeply digital workforce and deeply digital sort of lives, right?
I like your point about in emerging technology, the bad actors will come rushing in. So just be cautious, just be aware, use your common sense, and do the training. Which brings us to cyber, of course, cybersecurity, of course. As a business person thinking about AI, what do I need to think about in terms of AI and cybersecurity?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think the cybersecurity in the context of generative AI should really fall into the same category of conversation as all enterprise technology. And I think that's probably point number one. Point number two is that, at an enterprise level, banning generative AI applications is clearly, it's too late, right? The horse is bolted, or whatever that expression is. So I don't think that's going to work. So it's about, okay, how do you bring it in to the organization safely, right? And there are enterprise solutions for generative AI initiatives. There are, whether it be Microsoft or Amazon or whatever the case may be, and ensuring that as an organization, there are a couple of levels of protection. One is policy. That's kind of the easier one. Two, that there's a formalized body of work addressing generative AI as a program, for want of a better word. And then I think the third part of that is really, how do you leverage the value of it, right? In a safe way, in a controlled, safe way. So giving access to all of your people, ChatGPT-4 is probably not the right way. However, using ChatGPT-4 to build your own private models and private interfaces and custom interfaces is probably a far safer approach, right? And that ensures that you don't have stories like I think the poor gentleman at Samsung who accidentally uploaded some proprietary design documents, and you hear about it every so often. But I feel like a lot of that's abated now. I think people are, as in employees at large organizations, are now aware that that's, there's a public version which is, not safe, so to speak, in terms of protecting your proprietary IP. And then there's a quote unquote in-house version that your company has provided for you using the same foundational models, but also with some proprietary IP that's built purposely for the use of your employees. So That's probably the safest way to do it, right? You get the control consistency, you get the role-based sort of control that is necessary in an enterprise conversation.
Yeah, great points. And in fact, this whole conversation has been full of great points. What a delight to have you on the show. We'll go to a break now. You mentioned before that AI Group does a lot of things in this area, trying to help businesses understand. So this is a great opportunity to say our brand new podcast with my co-worker Louise McGrath is out now. It's called Debrief. It's a play on words. It's a briefing once a month on the 3Ds, and from the viewpoint of industry policy and industry development. This podcast is at a business level. The other podcast is helping you understand the policies that are emerging, including the ones that Dave just mentioned. I will put the link in the show notes. Be back soon.
If you have supply chain or business improvement challenges, contact AI Group's Business Improvement and Growth Hub. The Big Hub is a library of practical and relevant resources designed to assist member businesses to grow and improve. The Big Hub also includes an extensive network of experienced, pre-qualified business improvement consultants. For more details, contact big@aigroup.com.au. That's big@aigroup.com.au.
I'm talking to David Phung, and we're talking about artificial intelligence. Just want to say that I am the real James Scotland, and I'm not a bot. And we are talking about supply chains in particular, or business improvement, and the digitalisation of your workplace to help you improve. Supply chains, as I said at the beginning, Dave, is about the new world of business, where we took it from being everything done in-house to being this labyrinth of relationships from end to end. It's a really complex world that we live in. How is AI going to help us manage that labyrinth?
I really like the sentiment around a labyrinth of relationships, right? In the same way that an organization is a labyrinth of different workers with specialist skills across different areas, where it be, branding, marketing, product, risk, operations, etc. And, I see a world in the not too distant future where organizations and its staff are supported by an army of virtual agents that are not human, but specialize deeply in very, very specific and narrow tasks. And that narrow task could be one small component of a person's job, a human's job. And I see a world where, let's say I'm working as just by way of example, a consultant. And as a consultant, I would have a virtual, an AI-powered assistant. I have, for example, for diary and scheduling purposes. And I have an AI-powered assistant for report generation, and another one for email generation, and so on and so forth. All the various sort of component parts and component tasks of my overall job are augmented by that, right? And I have that in my Microsoft Teams, and I go to them for very, very specific things, and they'll amongst themselves interact, and they'll amongst themselves coordinate and organize and action things on my sort of oversight, right? I think that's a possibility that's not too far away because of the power of large language models that we've seen in applications like ChatGPT, right? And then if you combine that incredible, compute and AI power from the foundational models, and you combine that with custom interfaces, and you direct that, energy and potential to jobs and tasks, you'll have workforces that are a lot more productive, do a lot more in a shorter period of time with the same level of resource. And that's where I see that conversation play out, right? Where it be in a customer service or a product discovery sense or a innovation context, the list goes on, right? I don't think there's any knowledge worker role that shouldn't be supplemented and perhaps complemented is a better word by virtual agents. And what I mean by virtual agents is AI-powered assistants.
A lot of the repetitive processes are going to be moved off our desk, the same as we've been moving repetitive processes off the factory floor and then putting them into automation or whatever.
Yep.
Now we're bringing into the thinking space or the repetitive thinking space. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
I mean,
wow.
It's weird. I can't remember a time I didn't use ChatGPT on a daily basis, right? And I can like my workflow is sort of roughly like this, right? Let's say I'm preparing for a customer workshop and the customer is in X industry, right? Then what I'll do is go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I've got this workshop coming up and it's a customer in this industry. Tell me about the relevant scenarios, use cases and ideas for this industry. And then it'll give me a bit of a laundry list. And I've sort of trained my bot to essentially communicate the way I like, right? So I've said that it needs to be succinct. It needs to reference sources. It needs to be in dot point form so I can easily reference and provide feedback and, focus areas for subsequent prompting. And from there, I would prepare for a workshop and then I'd suggest agenda. I'd use the bot to suggest agendas. Then I'd run the workshop as a human. Then post-workshop, I'll use it to summarize notes, meeting notes and so forth. And also use it to start creating summary materials, summary PowerPoint decks and whatever the case may be. So, from an idea generation point of view, from an idea refinement point of view, from a communication point of view, that whole life cycle can be improved in some way with generative AI tools that are currently available, right? And that's just the text, right? I haven't really dabbled a great amount in image generation, other than for some sort of play around things. My work doesn't really involve a great deal of sort of visual type communications for now.
Surely you've checked to see what you look like in 20 years or 40 years or something.
I have used those apps actually. Yeah. I have used those apps. They're a bit of fun, right? And you can get yourself restyled into a cartoon form or whatever the case may be. So they're a bit of fun.
Like as a pirate or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So as a business owner, say I'm a business owner or senior manager of business, and I'm thinking about what you've just talked about. I know in my workforce I've got a number of different generations in my employ, and some are going to take it like, ducks to water. Others will just have it as in their head. They're just growing up with it. They don't see what the thing is, whilst others will find it a whole new world. How do you manage that? How do you try and help people? How do you physically try and help organizations to understand this new world?
Yeah, that's really, really topical right now, right? I mean, in the sense that if I was to pretend to be a change management professional, which I'm not, right? There's typically 3 categories of people, right? And it's actually less age driven than I had initially thought. So we've got a client, just as a side note. We've got a client, just as a side note, we've got a client who's early 70s, who's a neurosurgeon, and he's wanting to document 14,000 patient notes, many, many pages, 35 years of history. And that's, that's a certain generation. Then we've got some clients that are Gen Z and they're reluctant to, so I don't think that age is much of an issue. It's more about attitude towards change and attitude towards technology more so than generational differences. However, yes, there are patterns amongst generations. There are typically 3 categories, right? When you sort of do a technology project, the change management that wraps around it has a very strong correlation to the success of said project. And, the 3 categories are those that are on the fence, those that are absolutely just fly the flag for change and innovation, and then the kind of the opposite of that, right? They're just what do they call them? The black hats. Is it the de Bono thinking, the de Bono black hat? The theory, the change management theory tells us that you focus on those that are in the middle, and let's call them 33%, and you focus on those that are in the middle and you move them to become promoters and ambassadors of change. Thereby you get the majority of the organization. And then for the let's call them the laggards, they'll either self-select out or they'll sort of, they'll move into different spaces, right? That could be in or out of your organization. And I think that there's an inevitability to generative AI being a significant part of business, right? And the interesting thing, I think, with generative AI is that tools like ChatGPT have brought it to the forefront, right? Whereas previously it was very much in the background, right? If you've ever used Spotify, right, next song is generative AI, is AI. If you've ever watched YouTube, next video is AI driven, right? If you've ever shopped on Amazon, it's AI powered as well. Recommendations, right? People that bought this also bought this. So we already live in a very AI world. We just haven't called it that so much in the foreground, right? It's just a bit behind the curtain, so to speak. Whereas with tools like ChatGPT, there's no hiding, right? So, I think we're going to face, those that are paying attention now are the ones that will be positioned to win and to deliver value to their organizations. Those that are ignoring and putting their heads in the sand are going to be left behind, unfortunately. And there was an AI Industry Day event put on by the AI Group. It was 2 or 3 weeks ago now, and the sentiment I feel is changing. Right, there's significant interest and enthusiasm, even from more, let's call them traditional industries, right? Non-tech, non-tech industries that are really starting to pay attention to generative AI. Whereas previously they would have perhaps sat back and just waited until, things got more mature or things were a bit more mainstream. But now I think there's a bit more of a proactiveness, for want of a better word, a bit more of a proactiveness in their approach to, really wrapping their arms around generative AI, which is, I think, a good thing overall, because if it's deployed correctly, if the approach is right, real world value can be derived from it. I've seen this with my own 2 eyes, and we're lucky because we've had a front row seat to generative AI over the past couple of years, and really seen not only the technology evolve at an incredible pace, but also real world benefits being delivered by a generative AI project. So
it's a fascinating conversation, and it's one that we'll continue to have, no doubt. There's so much to this. Been a lot of good chunky stuff in today's. Thank you so much, Dave. 2 quick questions to finish. Firstly, why in God's name is it called ChatGPT? What does that mean?
I think it's called ChatGPT because the engineers were brought in to do the branding. And
that's what I've always thought. That's got nothing to do with nothing.
I mean, chat is just accessible, right? Everyone knows what chat is. GPT is just a silly acronym, right? It's just a silly acronym that they've tried to tack onto the end of it to show what the product is about.
It means something, but you don't need to know.
Nah, it stands for generative pre-trained transformer or something long-winded like that. But basically, it's engineering speak.
I remember about a couple of decades ago when I was in the banking industry, and they were talking about doing mobile banking, and they called it Wireless Application Protocol, WAP. Everyone kept talking about WAP, and I kept thinking, as a marketer, I can't see us using WAP. And then someone just said, why don't we just call it mobile banking? See, that was the marketing. That's right. That's the marketing version of it. And the last question: how do people get in contact with you? Give yourself a plug.
Oh, look, you can find me on LinkedIn. We'll maybe add an email into the show notes. But David Phung, find me on LinkedIn.
That's nice and easy. All right, we can do that.
Happy to chat. If you're at a juncture where you're thinking about pursuing a generative AI initiative, or if you're somewhere along the path on your generative AI journey and you want another pair of eyes over it, or you want a soundboard, just, find me, we can have a chat. And if I can help you, I will. But if I can't, then I'll say so.
Sounds good. That's perfect. It's perfect. And you've certainly been full of knowledge and insights today, so I appreciate that. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of another episode of Supply Circles. Thanks again to everyone for listening, and thank you for your feedback. If you have any feedback on today's interview with Dave, or ideas for the show, or just want to give me some feedback, hit me up at james.scotland with 1T, james.scotland@aigroup.com.au, or head over to my LinkedIn page. I'd love to hear from you. And we'll be back in a fortnight with more business improvement insights into the keys to building sustainable supply chains. Thanks for joining me. This is Supply Circles. I'm James Scotland. Bye for now.